Mirë se erdhët në Public Square. Unë jam Ditmir Bushati. I ftuari sotëm është Nikos Kotzias, një mik me cilin kam darë plot sfida gjatë ushtrimit të detyrës si ministër i punëve të jashtme. Një koleg prej mençurisë të cilit jam përpjekur të mësoj shumë. Nikos Kotzias është padyshim një prej figurave më të ndriçuara të Greqisë me një trashëgimi politike, diplomatike dhe akademike mjaft pasur. Është i njohur kontributi i tij i çmuar për stabilitetin rajonal, që u simbolizua me nënshkrimin e marrëveshjes së Prespës ndërmjet Greqisë dhe Maqedonisë së Veriut. Gjithnjë i orientuar nga zgjidhja e problemeve me vështrim nga ardhmja, e jo thjesht ekspozimi i tyre, bashkë me Nikos Kotziasin u investuam në një proces dinamik të përbashkët me qëllim gjetjen e zgjidhjeve për një sër çështje dypalëshe. Së bashku me Nikos jemi editor të një libri që përmban përmbledhje kontributesh të kolegëve nga Europa Juglindore dhe Mesdheu për të ardhmen e rajonit tonë. Duhet thënë se karriera akademike, diplomatike dhe politike e Nikos Kotziasit reflekton rrugtimin e proceseve politike transformuese të Greqisë që nga junta ushtarake deri më sot. Nikos Kotzias është autori 24 librave në fushën e marrëdhënieve ndërkombëtare e shkencave politike. Ai është një prej themeluesve të lëvizjes politike Prato në Greqi. Dear Nikos, it's an honor and pleasure to have you part of the Public Square. And let me start by asking you a question about the most important issue the security environment of our continent is facing since last February when Russia invaded Ukraine. What are the main consequences in security, political and economic terms according to you?
It's the first time in Europe that after the Second World War that a big power, because we have had the Yugoslavian wars, but there have been not a big power starting these wars, a big power is trying to get part of a third country against the international law, against what has been accepted in Helsinki even during the Cold War, and against the right of the existence of a nation and of state by their own decision. So we have a big problem that we have now a Russian foreign policy and a war coming from Russia, which is trying to put down the whole nation, because they are the opinion that there was a mistake, historical mistake from Lenin, even from Lenin, that he gave the possibility for Ukraine to create their own state. And I think that is very important for all our countries in Balkan, which are countries with many historical conflicts and problems because of these conflicts, that we will have to push that everybody has to respect the international law. So I think it's very important for the future of our region and our continent that Putin is not going to win this war. Because if he wins this war, then the international law, which is a base for our smaller countries, small and middle countries, will not exist anymore in the reality.
When we discuss about Ukraine, what could possibly comes next? I'm asking this question because nowadays we see a synchronization of the West, but then there is also the rest. And if we see the numbers in terms of population and the way how countries decided to introduce or not introduce sanctions against Russia, we see that a majority of population of the world is not part of the sanction. Is the war in Ukraine a European or a global problem, according to your view?
To my opinion, it's a war in Europe, but it's about international law and international security. I think that the most important country is China on this question you have put to me. China has a dilemma between their values and their political relation to Russia. China doesn't want to become a power which stay alone in Asia. They prefer to be together with Russia and to have an alliance with them. But by the other side, the Russian politics is against their own values, because if you look after the foreign policy of China and their 5 principles, then you will find out that the most important principle of them is the sovereignty of a state, that you cannot occupy part of a state, and that this state has all the rights to be independent as a whole state. So what the Russians are doing is against the principles of the China foreign policy in behalf of Taiwan, some years before Hong Kong, and so on. But on the other side, the everyday politics is bringing them together with Russians. So they are sitting in this dilemma. What is more important for their future? To keep this relation with Russia, or to keep and be full trust with their own decision of values and principles in the foreign policy. So it is, I think, a problem for them. I will not say that this country is to be added to Russians' behavior.
Yeah.
This country doesn't like to put under press from the Western countries, wants to have its own decision, but its own decision has to make a decision about with the law, the international law, that they always say that they are protecting it, or are they with Moscow because they have a very special relation?
77 years ago, George Kennan wrote this famous long telegram where he was highlighting his ideas and providing his bosses in the State Department from Moscow with the so-called policy of containment on Russia, on Soviet Union at that time. What would be the policy of the West, I mean NATO, EU, towards Russia, but also how do you see the cooperation within G20, OSCE, and other forums where Russia is present?
First, I think that you have to keep 2 forms of policy with these countries: cooperation, and to stop their plans to be aggressive. And it's very important for the West countries, as I discussed about it many times in the Council of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, that you cannot keep everybody under sanctions, under the Kennan proposals, because in this way, I said that 2015, in this way you will create, that's very important, you create yourself a bloc of many countries who are opposite to you. So you have to make a decision, which is the most important country for you, from which country you think you have to be afraid that this country will disturb the international security system, and then to try to keep apart the countries, because nowadays under sanctions from one or the other form are more than 40% of the world population, and with 40% of the world population and 30% of the international social product, you have a big bloc against you. So it will be much more wiser to make decisions that I keep some of these countries away from the whole conflict, that I will try some of this country to take with me in my bloc or in my decisions process, and to find 1 or 2 countries which you believe that they are disturbing and disrupting the whole international system. So I think it's not very wise what Western moment is doing, not keeping apart all these powers, but bringing them together. Then the second thing is We have an experience, Ditmir, from the Cold War times. In the Cold War times, you have two. You can tell two stories, two interpretations. The one is that there have been two big blocks under the two superpowers or big powers, whatever you call them, and all the countries which has been in one or the same by each block has followed the superpower. But if you study closer the time of Cold War, you will find out that it was not so easy. The whole story the description is not exactly, because in the time of the Cold War, most of the countries have been following the superpower from the one or the other side, but many countries have taken their own initiatives to implement their own interest. For example, France was having its own foreign policy, sometimes with Americans, sometimes even against the Americans. Or remember China of Mao Zedong, who said that the core enemy is the social imperialism, the Soviet Union. Or think even smaller countries like Cuba, who tried to make a revolution in Bolivia or in Angola or in Mozambique without to have an agreement that everybody will follow this politics with the Russians, with the Soviets. So in the Cold War, we have the two blocks. The majority of the countries of each bloc was behind the core line of the big power, but there have been smaller power who used this bloc to implement their own interest and to press the big power in the whole bloc to follow them. That was the fight inside the blocks. Now, why I'm telling you about the story? Because I believe this is not the same like in Western or in Eastern, is that the important powers in the European Union, they didn't want to support at the beginning Ukraine. They thought that in 3-4 days, Putin will be in Kiev, and we'll have to make an arrangement like we have done with Kiev, maybe the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th Minsk agreement. And so Biden was saying, don't forget it, please. Biden was saying, if the invasion of the Russians will be a small one for 5 days, okay, remember. And the Germans, they sent some clothes as a support for the war to the Ukrainians. So in my opinion, in my view, the Ukrainians have made what the middle and smaller countries have done sometimes during the Cold War. They have resisted against the views or the thoughts or the plans from Western and against the hopes of the Russians that in 4 or 5 days they will occupy Kiev. So the support to Ukraine came not on time, came always with a time lag.
Yeah.
And this is a proof that nobody was preparing to attack over or through Ukraine, Russia.
Yeah.
Because if there was a plan, as Putin said, then Ukraine will have from the 24th of February all the weapons that they needed to make the attack. So, because always we say that for the truth, the control is making through the praxis. The reality is that Ukraine didn't have the weapons to attack Russia. Then we have seen during the war a second thing. This war is asymmetric. Why is asymmetric? It's not only because Russia is a bigger power than Ukraine, but because this war is without cost for the Russian population and the Russian cities. There is a very specific war. Russia is destroying hospitals, schools, states, streets, bridges, and so on. And Ukraine cannot answer because Russia has the atomic weapons. Yes, and you remember that the Ukraine gave up their own atom weapons to the Russians. And they took guarantee from Russia that they will never attack them. Not only they will never attack them, but they will protect them from any enemy or a country which will try to attack them. So now we have the second conclusion is that to fight against a power which has a very strong weapons is a very difficult story, because the whole war will find place only in your country, and what will be destroyed is only your country, and only your children will be killed, only your women will be raped, and so on. So that is a very specific situation, and I cannot understand people who are trying to explain the whole Ukraine war with old schema from Cold War, that Russia is protecting itself from the Western who try to invade or to destroy the Russian. Yeah. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that we have to do with a human catastrophic disasters. And we have to support people, because we are in our political parties, our political families, the first thing that we believe, and we are saying always to ourselves and to each other, is the most important thing is the human being. To protect human life and to protect yourself, to stay as a human being with empathy to the people. So that is the three most important things from this war. And it means that if Russia is not going to lose, there will be always countries or leaderships who will think that is a nice thing to make an attack without to have an answer. And then it will be a situation where other countries will think, why not to get these very heavy weapons so that we can make war or an invasion without any answer from third sides. And I think that is very important, because that will bring us in a very insecure situation, the whole world. So we have to answer to this aggression. And then we have our region. In our region, as you know, part of the region is, we always say together, prisoners of the history. We have to learn from history. There are many conflicts. Yeah. There are very specific conflicts. It's not. I never said that only the one side is wrong, or only the one side is giving the law, but giving the law. But if you see Bosnian and the internal conflicts, that the Croatian and the Serb population have many questions. If they have to stay there, how to stay there. If you see that Bosnian has at their heat, as in form of atypical king, a third person, as if that it was a colony from the European Union in Bosnia. If you see the unsolved problem of Kosovo and Serbia, if you see that in our region, chauvinism, so negative nationalism is coming up, then you have to to be very careful and to try to keep the peace in the whole continent, and not to let that the instability in Ukraine is coming south to us. Then we have a good memory what happens with the Yugoslavian wars. It was very difficult to keep these wars outside of our borders and to protect our populations. So I think this war is a very bad history, and we have to protect the values of international law and of humanity, so that no other powers will come to the thought that they can try to do the same.
Speaking about values, and speaking also about the blocks that you have been referred also from the Cold War, how do you assess the position of Turkey? So Turkey is not joining the sanctions of the West against Russia. On the other hand, it's keeping the channels of communication open with both sides, with Russia and with Ukraine.
I think the most important story with Turkey is that they are keeping their economy alive. they are bringing all the canals of economy relation between Russia and the Western world through their own canals and their own trade. And so they are making some money because they have a very difficult economic situation nowadays. It's more difficult than 2 months ago. And they are trying to play a role between the two blocks. So it's a big question. Not what I'm thinking about it, but what is the Western thinking about it? And here, so long I know, my experience is that the Western, specifically the Americans, are thinking in three scenarios. The one is that maybe they can win Erdogan and his company, but this scenario is not anymore very hard and has not a large support. The second scenario is that they can keep Turkey, and we have to wait that Erdogan can go. If Erdogan is going away from the political scene in Turkey, and then we will have more possibilities. So people in Washington to find a way for communication, for understanding with Erdogan. And the third is that the West didn't lost Erdogan only, but lost Turkey. And by the first and second scenario, they have clear positions, Americans. So we cannot win Erdogan, but we have to keep with him a relation so that we can find a better relation. We can create better relation with the government that will follow Erdogan. But about the third scenario, there are big fights inside the American administration. If Turkey will become a second Pakistan, or we can bring Turkey again to a European and Western road. It's a difficult answer. You have to try to find ways to discuss with them, to cool the atmospherics in the relation between countries as mine, Greece and Turkey. But it is not easy. So we have to keep, again, like with the Russian, this double politic praxis. One side, we have to keep them away from any kind of thoughts to make an aggression act. And other side, to be in communication with them and to try to understand the way they think and what disturbs them. In both cases, in Russia and Turkey, we have to remember one of the most important results of history of diplomacy, that you cannot make negotiation when that is not easy to make negotiation, when there will be no cost by the other side. That was what I was trying to say about Russia. The war is not in Russia land, it's not in the Russian states. So the cost of the war is not the same as Ukraine, where the Russians bombed and destroyed the country. And the Turkish have to understand that we want to be friends, to have good relations, that is good for the people of both countries, but it will be not for them without cost to choose any other kind of politics.
Nikos, you have been discussing a little bit before also about the unresolved disputes or disagreements or conflicts in our neighborhood. On the other hand, everybody knows, and it is maybe the moment also to mention that you have played an instrumental role on concluding Prespa agreement with North Macedonia. We have started together also a process.
That was a good story.
Yes,
so good. It was so good for our people.
Yes, we have started also this process where we discuss most of the pressing issues between Albania and Greece. And I remember you kept saying that trust is important in the interstate relations, in the personal relations, in business relations. You have written also a few years ago a book where the epicenter of it is.
That was a big book, 1,007 pages.
The point I'm making
is about trust.
Yeah, how to cultivate trust in the current circumstances.
My experience with the negotiation was always that we have had a honest broker between the two sides. And what I found out is that every side try to find the best, the most hardest arguments to explain to the honest broker why they are right. So Nimitz was coming in Athens, and I said to him, we have right on this, we have right on that. You know, my arguments are so good. And then he said, okay, I will say that in Skopje. And then he moved to Skopje. They said to him the same. No, our arguments are better. We have the history with us, not them, and so on. And then he came back, and he called me and said to me, yeah, they have right too. And so the problem was that when you are trying to explain to third person or to influence his opinion, then you become more extremist. You try to bring more arguments about your position. I find out that it was better to make the negotiation directly with Nicholas Dimitrov. Why? Because first, we stopped to try to say the one to the other why we are right, because that was not negotiation, that was statements. Then we start out a discussion, what is for you important?
Yeah.
What is for you important? What is for me important? And as most of the negotiation, in my experience, I make hundreds of negotiations, I find out, as always, that we have not the same priorities. So by users, A was for them 100% important, but by us only 40% important. But by users, B was for them not so much important as for me. So we thought to make as we say in the science, the packet negotiation, not only to put one question and two positions, but to put many questions and to discuss what is important for you, what is important for me. So during these discussions, we start to say the difficulties that we have had in our countries, that everybody was attacking us as a traitor. So the same text was against all the interests of North Macedonia, was against all the interests of Greece. The same text was a result that Dimitrov didn't keep the positions of North Macedonian, but in the Greek parliament, I was a traitor because I didn't keep any position of Greece. And we found with that, we in the evenings, by eating together, we have started to discuss about our difficulties with this negotiation inside the government, inside the country, inside the public opinion. And what was come out, and we theoretical, you know it, but practical came out, was that we are closer with each other because we try to find a solution, then with the third persons in both countries who have been fighting against any kind of solution, because they have been making business without solution, because they are chauvinists, because they like to play the hard people and so on. I'm not saying that you have to compromise in any case, but with trust, you can find a good compromise, that both sides can be winners. So we started to get trust to each other. Then we found that the division line was not anymore about North Macedonian and Greeks, but was more important was about people who try to find a solution, if they will find one, and people who are against, principally against it, because their interest is against any form of solution. And in this process, find that we are together trying to find a solution, that there have been people attacking us, our family, our integrity. We started to have trust to each other, because he knew that they tried to kill me. So I knew that they have been trying to kill the leadership of North Macedonia. So we have understand that the enemy is not Greek one or a North Macedonian one, but the enemy are the people who don't want to have solutions in problems which are closing our countries in a prison. Mm-hmm. And here I have to say, because I'm discussing with you, in this trusting building and in this work to find a solution, a very specific role has been played by the Albanians of North Macedonians, who have understood, I think, earlier as many of us in both countries, that it will be good for the security in our region, that it will be good for the future relation between our two countries to find a solution. And they have helped to find the solution. And I will be, so long I'm in life, very thankful to the, as I call it sometimes with honor, to the Albanian factor in North Macedonia and all over the region for helping us with their positions, with their behavior, to find solution, to find better way to trust each other.
20 years ago, in this Thessaloniki summit, EU promised membership to Western Balkan countries. 20 years later, and I know I'm asking this question because I know that you have been a protagonist of Thessaloniki summit. You have been helping George Papandreou and also Foreign Service at the time with ideas about Europe and Western Balkans. 20 years later, only Croatia managed to join European Union, and Bundeskanzler Scholz is speaking about the acceleration of the EU accession process under the condition that first EU should be reformed and then enlarged. Shall we expect a Zeitenwende also in terms of the accession of Western Balkans into EU?
I will say, European Union is not only not keeping their promise from Saloniki, mm-hmm. but it's not the same as it was during the Saloniki summit. That's very important, mm-hmm. because French and Germans are not in the same way in cooperation as they have been in Saloniki. Germans have made the enlargement they wanted. The enlargement that the Germans always wanted was Eastern Europe, to take this part of Europe under their finance control, the trying, I do not know how we can describe it. And the French wanted always to deepen the integration, to give priority to the more integration than to the enlargement, hoping that they will control German. We have seen this behavior during the Maastricht, as they thought that if we are going to create a euro, then Germany will lose the power of the Denmark, and they will, through euro, keep controlling the Germans. But, you know, the plan was wrong. I think the second thing that the French wants to have is a deeper defense system, security and foreign policy system in European Union. Here they are right. Germans want to do it, but under the condition that they will be equal with the French, but the French are stronger in these questions than the Germans. So we have an asymmetric relation, one very strong in financing and economics country, and one stronger in the defense questions, even in diplomacy, I will say. And this conflict between these two countries is stopping the enlargement that Europe needs. It's not only my wish or your wish, Europe needs. And the war of Ukraine has approved it or not. So we have three duties to do together, all together with our friends who have this network. First, an own security system for the region. Second, to explain why one of the conclusions of the Ukraine war is that we have to keep this road for the integration of Western Balkans in European Union. And third is that we have to look better after our countries about corruption, institutions, democracy, and the rule of law.
Now, we have experienced different waves, let's say, of Greece presence in the region as a part of the region. I refer to Thessaloniki agenda. I referred also to your engagements with North Macedonia, with Albania, but also the rapprochement towards Kosovo, although it's not yet recognized by Greece. I'm very grateful for what you did during the lobbying for the start of the accession negotiations, because you were.
That was hard fighting.
Yeah, you were there. So and we have always discussed together that at the end of the day, even when we'll join European Union, we have to deal mostly with each other rather than with northerners. So in this respect, what would be your piece of advice for any Greek government in relation to the Balkans? Because my impression is that now there is this classical type of engagement with Balkans.
We are back. We are losing time again. This government has no interest in real politics, not only in communications, and they are looking. They are making foreign policy looking inside their own party, not even inside the country, but in their own party. That is not easy, this situation for the other countries. But I think the most important story is to reactivate the networks on the Balkan, then the cooperation between the Balkan countries, between the states, the societies, the universities, the companies, the enterprises. Then we need this cooperation, this coming together, not only today, preparing some countries to become member of the European Union, but we need this cooperation for the future of our position inside the European Union. Then we have the Visegrad countries. We have the big countries, Italy, France, Germany. We have the Benelux. We have the Balticum. We have the Scandinavian Squid plus Balticum. When, if European Union, and I wish it and I will work for it, develop to become a European Union from 35, 36, 37 members, then the specific role of any Southeastern European country will be not very important. So countries with 600,000 population, or even with 10 million like us, they will not have an important voice inside the European Union. I'm very realistic, and I have to say it. But if we are cooperating, if we are working together to find our common interest, to articulate this common interest, and to fight for the implementation of them, then we will be greater, with more population, much more countries than Visegrad or Benelux or Scandinavian. Will become so big in population as France, but with 11 countries, not with one, with 11 votes in the council. So I think we have to keep trying to find the ways for the cooperation and to understand our common interests in the future. We can, your position, my position was always, and I'm thankful for that to you, we cannot always look to the past. That is the easy way. Yeah. We cannot think that the past or the status quo in a world which is changing, and Ukraine has saw it, to think that we can go back to status quo, to go back in the past, and the past was so beautiful. There is no way to do that. Yes. Only in these time machines, in science fiction romance can you do it. Oh, maybe after 2,000 or 20,000 years. But nowadays, the only way to find solution, even in the historical problems, in this region, even problems which didn't find a solution in the last 20, 30, 40 years, is to think about future, but underlined about our common future.
Speaking about the common future, this is my last question. What are the lessons that we should draw as left and progressive activists and politicians in the current circumstances? What are the main lessons?
I have some thoughts, very critical thoughts. I'm not very happy with the situation of the left parties in Europe and in Greece too. I'm older man than the most of the people nowadays. I think first we have to work more with ourselves, to learn more, to work with theory more, to understand the praxis we have done and what was wrong, what was right, what have been the lessons. The second is we have to have more some thoughts. We have to have visions about the future. Nowadays, left parties, progressive parties do not have enough. Sometimes they do not have even one paragraph, one article about their vision. And we have to explain to the people that this vision, this what we are thinking that will be good for our societies, for our people, is not a question if you can do it, because we are realistic utopians, I say sometimes. But the question is if we want to do it, and why it is very important to do it, and to show to the people which will be the results if you will not go after a vision, after a plan for the future of our countries. We have a big problem, Ditmir. The Western is declining. We discuss about it in a way, maybe slowly, maybe not so slowly. Inside the Western, the part of the West which has the most problems and is very possible to decline more quickly than the other parts of Western is European Union. And inside European Union and Europe as candidates or as members, our region is a region that has the biggest problem inside the European continent, which has the biggest problem inside the Western world. So if we are not doing something, if we are not changing the plan that we have for the future, if we are not dreaming about this future, if we do not have vision, and if we have not the power and the soul to fight for this future and this vision, we will be the big loser of the 21st century.
Nikos, what is the most recent book you are reading that you could share with our audience?
So
I know that you read, I know that you read and write a lot. So if you have more than one book, please feel free.
The last 10 years, since 2014, I wrote one book was about Greece as debt colony with 5 editions. The second was the left and the patriotism, because we have many people in the left, they think we have not to be patriotic because that was chauvinist or so on. It's wrong, because if you are not patriotic, if you have not the patriotism as a big value in your soul, then the extreme rights will occupy this field. Yeah. I always say it's not the agenda, extreme right or left, is the substance you are giving to this agenda. Is the question of patriotism is not left or right, is what is the substance. So I wrote about that. Then I wrote a book about Cyprus. Then came the book 2 years back, The Logic of a Solution, is about North Macedonian Prespas negotiation. The last we have edited together is about the future of our region. And what I'm now writing a big book, and I'm writing is since 3.5 years, I will need 5 years to do it, is about Marx as a theoretical of international relations. And what is very interesting is that Marx hated Tsarism and Russia. If you read Marx, his descriptions about Poland, he has manuscripts about it, more than altogether 2,000 pages, very long work. It's the description of the Ukraine problem. It's exactly the description. And I think working with Marx, it was very easy for me to find a position to be against this war and against the invasion of Russia.
Thank you very much. It was honor and pleasure to be with you at Public Square. Thank you. Faleminderit, ευχαριστώ.
Thank you, Public Square, to give me so much time to say some of my thoughts. And thank you for your questions.
Thank you.